What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be reacting to some of your guys' unpopular opinions about the Liberty Falls reveal for Black Ops 6 Zombies. So we have quite a bit of comments to go through here. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. Not all of these would I consider to necessarily be unpopular opinions, but regardless, I just want an excuse to read some of your guys' comments and some of your thoughts on Liberty Falls. I decided I'd split this up to where the first half of this video is going to be the mostly positive comments, and then we'll get into the mostly negative comments later on. First comment comes from Caleb. Even though the map has zero aura, I'm still excited to see what the Easter egg has in store for us. The intro cutscene was one of the best we've ever seen. There are clearly big story implications for this map. So yeah, I would consider this to be a mostly positive comment, even though the whole zero aura comment, which is a very popular thing I've been hearing people say. But I do think this is a fair take to have. You know, of course, the map didn't look amazing in the gameplay presentation, but that doesn't mean there isn't anything to look forward to. There definitely is. I am mostly excited for the Easter egg personally. I think the Easter eggs are the most important part of Zombies maps, at least in the current day. It's the thing I care about the most in Zombies, so as long as we have a great Easter egg with a lot of fun side quests that are all really rewarding, then the game will probably be fun. I just don't know if it's actually going to have that, though. I'm really worried that they're going to be disappointing, but they've really hyped them up. They've really hyped these Easter eggs up as being Black Ops 3 quality again and being much more difficult than Cold War's Easter eggs, so I do think we're going to get some good stuff there, regardless of if the map doesn't really have much of an interesting aesthetic to it. Next comment comes from You Only Luke Once. The idea of it being just a random Monday afternoon with a zombies outbreak is actually cool. Not every map needs to be in a dreary, rundown, or creepy place. So I actually agree with this quite a bit, which is why I'm not really against the aesthetic as much as other people are saying. Do I think it's that great of an aesthetic? No, definitely not. Like, this is definitely not going to be up there as one of the best looking maps of all time, not even close. But as a singular map, am I okay with it having that aesthetic where it's just a normal town? Honestly, yeah. I just don't want to see anything like this again. That's basically my perspective of it. And as long as the Easter egg utilizes the Dark Ether in some interesting ways, and we'll probably have more areas that'll be explorable later on when the full game comes out, because I believe in COD Next, they were kind of restricted to a specific area, but I do think there's going to be some lab areas probably underneath the map, and I guess we'll have to wait and see those areas later on. I'm just assuming. I'm not, saying that's 100% or anything like that, but I feel like it would make sense for there to be some more areas. But I do think Treyarch could at the very least up the saturation a little bit. If they're going to do anything with the map, just up the saturation. It's quite dull looking. Maybe just make it a little more colorful. You actually could do this on your own monitor yourself. You could up the saturation on the monitor, but I hate doing that personally because whenever I've tried to do that before, I tried doing it with some of the recent Call of Duties that just don't look colorful enough, and I'll up the saturation, but then I'll go back to play like Black Ops 4 or something, which is a very colorful Call of Duty, and then the saturation will look terrible because it's just too colorful to the point where it hurts your eyes. So like, I like keeping it at the same level, and I don't want to have to keep upping it and lowering it just based on what game or map I'm playing. I feel like that would just get too complicated. So I think they should definitely just internally up the saturation just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a crazy colorful, but enough to the point where people aren't getting so bored to look at just these gray colors the whole time. Next comment comes from The Real Nova YouTube. The map itself looks perfectly fine, and it does actually look like a zombies map, but the HUD and stream quality completely ruined it. If people saw the clean, no HUD gameplay of the map from the reveal, it actually looks great. Before the reveal with the teaser, we had no one complaining about the look or it being set at day or it not looking like zombies, and it's because that's not the problem. The constant awful bitrate compression and live stream glitches on top of every single HUD element possible being enabled makes it incredibly hard to get a good look at what the map truly looks like. I used to think Cold War looked awful, but when I did the no HUD glitch, I realized the maps actually look super nice, but it's nearly impossible to see that with all the pop-ups, damage numbers, and health bars covering the entire map. Now, I agree with this for the most part. I would say there's certain things I maybe disagree with, but for the most part, I do agree for sure. The HUD is one of the biggest things making the game not look as good as it would otherwise. So I really think their gameplay that they were showing live, they definitely should have, disabled some of the HUD elements for the presentation, or just make the default HUD just look better. Why do we need to have all these things as the default HUD? I know you can turn them off, thankfully, but like as the default, your first impression look of the game, it probably should look better than that, especially for all the casuals who maybe don't know that you can turn a lot of those things off. Now, I do still think that there is some things that could be done with the actual look of the map itself, because even just map itself without talking about the HUD, I do still think the map looks a bit bland. And even going back to Cold War Zombies, the maps definitely do look a lot better when you have no HUD. Like, it's not something you can actually do in the game itself. There is a glitch that allows you to do it. But if you actually just look at the maps themselves, yeah, they don't look that bad. They don't look as bland as a lot of people say. But I do still think they look quite bland in comparison to something like Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4, even when we're not talking about the HUD. So that kind of extends over to Black Ops 6, specifically with Liberty Falls. I do think the map still does look bland, even when you're taking into account the fact that there's a HUD there. But yes, the HUD just makes it 1,000 times worse. So does the live stream that they were doing, where they were live streaming someone else live streaming. It was just like a double live stream, so the bitrate's going to look awful. If you look at just the actual gameplay from the specific YouTubers that posted it straight to their channel, it definitely looks a lot better than if you're watching it through the CodNext live stream. But still, I do think it's not the best possible presentation of the map, because you have this really bad looking HUD just completely taking up most of the screen. And so hopefully when the full game comes out, we can adjust that ourselves. It's going to look a bit better. But at the end of the day, I do still think there is a little bit of work they could still do in terms of, like I said, the saturation, just the overall look of the map. But Terminus looks great. I have no issue with how Terminus looks. But I am a bit scared to see what it looks like with the HUD on, because I feel like it won't look nearly as good with the HUD on. Next comment comes from Spencer. This is definitely going to be an easier map to play and is for those that are newer to the game or are those who just want to chill. I'm excited because it goes back to the roots of zombies, a somewhat basic map to kill zombies on, and it sounds like there would be a good amount of side quests on the map and whatnot, so I feel like it's very hard to judge it just until we see the full thing. So I see what he's trying to say here, but at the same time, I don't entirely agree, because I feel like when you talk about the roots of zombies, these gameplay systems are very different than like the roots of zombies. But I do see what you mean in terms of the overall like complexity of the map being quite simple, but obviously the map layout and the systems, those are nothing like classic zombies at all. But the idea of the map itself, the fact that you might have a lot more players who just want to play this map to chill, not necessarily worry about Easter eggs and side Easter eggs, I can understand that. But there are still going to be those Easter eggs and side Easter eggs on the map itself. I will say something I've never really understood when it comes to this conversation about different types of maps that have different purposes is the fact that a lot of the times these quote-unquote complex maps could still be played quite casually. Like, I feel like most maps you could just jump on it just to have, you know, fun and kill zombies. You don't have to worry about Easter eggs. You don't have to worry about all these side quests. Like, most maps do kind of deliver that experience just fine. I personally don't think there's that many maps where it's like, okay, you have to do a bunch of Easter eggs to be anywhat successful on the map itself. And even going back to old zombies, like, yeah, you know, most of the maps definitely were more simple, but they were all very hard too. So like, I never really found like a very chilling experience on some of those older maps, because you were kind of fighting for your life on most of them. I mean, sure, maybe a map like Kino to Toten or Ascension, those are definitely maps where it's like, okay, they're pretty easy, especially compared to the other Black Ops maps, so those are not that bad to just hop on and chill. But if you play like Shangri-La or Moon, like, you're going to be fighting for your life quite a bit. Those are not easy maps. Playing 5, like 5 is a fighting for your life every 2 seconds kind of a map. So I do think the variety and difficulty between the maps were very present back in the day as well. It wasn't just like a bunch of easy maps. But when we're talking about simplicity and complexity, I feel like those are completely separate things. I feel like sometimes people kind of mix up those words. They'll use the word simple and easy like interchangeably. They're like, okay, this map is very simple, so it must be easy, or this map is very complex, so it must be hard. But I don't think those really correlate exactly, because you could have a relatively complex map like Shadows of Evil, which I don't really think is that hard of a map though. Like, I feel like Shadows of Evil is not ever seen as like one of the hardest maps. It's just kind of seen as a map that's a little more complex than the average map, especially when it comes to like actually setting up. But I don't think anyone would sit here and say it's like one of the hardest zombies maps. And you can even go to Black Ops 4, there's quite a lot of complex maps there, but most of them really aren't that hard, at least in my opinion. And then obviously if you go back to Black Ops 1, most of those maps are pretty simple. I mean, 5 is definitely a very simple map. But regardless, I do like the idea of Terminus being a much harder map, at least according to Treyarch, and then Liberty Falls being the easier one. And I don't really know what that's going to extend to. Is that also going to extend to the Easter eggs, or is it just the core gameplay of the maps itself? I really don't know, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Next comment comes from Beast Powers. Cut this map some slack. People need to understand that the 4 years of of development will pay off in the DLC season, with some Zombies DLC maps completed prior to the game launching. I'm sure we can expect high quality maps coming later in seasons without the quality dropping off dramatically mid-cycle. If you're disappointed at the cinematic not matching your expectations, that's fine, but I look at the cinematic as an introduction to the BO6 zombie story and not just library falls. I'm sorry, I thought that was funny. That cutscene tells us more about the story we can expect rather than the map, and the story sounds really good and worth the excitement. Last point I want to make is that library falls, what are you saying? Probably wasn't planned to release as a map. I think Treyarch planned Liberty Falls, hey, got it right in the third one, to be a backstory that's told through Intel at first, but a few months before launch decided to make it a map for new players who may be put away by Terminus, which is a huge map that a new player will most likely be completely lost in. So basically, thanks to 4 years development, I look forward to the DLC season of BO6. So I get what's being said here generally speaking, but I personally don't agree with the idea of, oh, it's fine if the launch maps aren't great because the DLC is going to give us better maps. I don't know, that mentality to me isn't something I would personally go with. Not that I think Liberty Falls is going to be bad or anything. I don't think Terminus will be bad either, but the idea of, oh, the criticism, it doesn't really matter, we got to cut it slack because there's going to be better DLC. The launch is going to decide like what kind of excitement people are going to have for the rest of the game. I mean, BO4 is a great example of that. The launch just didn't really sit well with people in terms of all the crashing. Even though I was personally enjoying BO4 at launch, a lot of people weren't, and that immediately set a kind of bad taste in people's mouths for the rest of the DLC season, to the point where they were less willing to look forward to them or even accept the maps. Like, people were not excited for Ancient Evil at all. I remember the hype being really, really low, and when the map did come out, you know, people realized it was pretty good, but at the same time, the hype was just so low. Alpha Omega, I feel like the hype was a lot higher because it was the return of Ether. We haven't had an Ether map since Blood of the Dead and Classified at that point, so people were really excited for the Ether map, and Ultimus was going to be on the map with Primus. Everyone was so excited, but again, the map ended up not really delivering completely for a lot of people, so the excitement dropped again, and then Togen excitement was kind of there just to see the end of Ether, but other than that, it like wasn't as high as it was before. So I do think the launch is going to decide how excited people are for the rest of the year. I think it's really, really important. I don't think people are just going to forget about how good or bad the launch maps are and just be like, okay, well, hopefully the DLC is good. That's just not going to happen, I don't think, especially because there's a lot of games where the best map is the launch map. I mean, look at Infinite Warfare, World War II. For a lot of people, Black Ops 3, even though I think the Rising Dark's better than Shadows of Evil. I think Garage Krovi's better than Shadows of Evil 2, actually, but a lot of people like Shadows of Evil the most. I think launch maps are just extremely important in regards to what people are going to think about this game in the long term. So hopefully we're going to get some good maps here, even if Liberty Falls isn't great. Again, let's hope Terminus is, or maybe it'll be a huge twist and Liberty Falls is going to be the good map, and then everyone's going to hate Terminus. That would be a crazy twist. Next comment comes from L Topcat. I think this map is going to be similar to how BO3 came in, with 2 different maps with a different difficulty and complexity. I think this map will act similar to the Giant in that it is a simple map compared to Shadows of Evil. I may not think it's going to be revolutionary or anything, but I don't get the hate it's getting, since I think it's good to have 2 maps that are different in tone and complexity. So this has been a pretty common comment I've been seeing, and I don't really entirely agree, just because they didn't advertise this as being that, and I don't think it's gonna be that because, well, it's going to have an Easter egg. It's going to have side Easter eggs. The Giant didn't really have all that. They had the little fly trap thing, that was it, and then the little robot shooting the perk machine. Those weren't like huge Easter eggs. Obviously, the Giant was just meant to be a remaster of a classic, and it was meant to be kind of just a survival map. You just kind of have fun with it and do whatever. It's not really meant to be a big map. It's a bonus map, right? Shadows of Evil was the big map. This is not how they've been advertising Black Ops 6, though. They've been advertising it as 2 round-based maps on launch. They have not been saying 1 map plus a bonus map. They've been saying 2 round-based maps with Easter eggs, and they've been making that pretty clear. Obviously, 1 map is probably going to be a lot simpler, and obviously we can clearly see the tone is very different, but that doesn't change the fact that it is still a main round-based map. It is still going to be a very important map. So I feel like there's nothing wrong with people sort of judging it the same way they would judge any other main round-based map, especially because the game had 4 years of development. So I'm not surprised by it, and I also think the Giant, like, aesthetically just looked a lot better than Liberty Falls does, so I also understand bland. People complaining about that side of Liberty Falls, it doesn't really matter if it's a simple map or not. Like, regardless of that, if they don't like how it looks, they don't like how it looks. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been seeing a lot of people making comments like, oh, the map looks like it has nothing to do on it, it looks very bland, there's not enough quests. Obviously, those comments are completely misinformed because they don't realize that all those quests and Easter eggs were turned off for the COD Next presentation of the map. So obviously, there's going to be a lot more on the map when we actually get to see it. But at the same time, I think it's fair to judge it just the same as you would with any other main round-based map. Next comment comes from Andrew. This map will likely be played more than Terminus because it will be used for farming gobblegums and camo grinding. So this is probably the unfortunate truth. Even if everyone like unanimously agrees that Terminus is just overall a better map, you're probably going to get more people playing Liberty Falls because they're just trying to grind their camos and grind their gobblegums and all that stuff, which you'll be able to do that on Terminus too. I don't think it's going to be like impossible to do that on Terminus. It's just chances are you're going to be able to shoot through the rounds a bit faster and get to just more kills quicker on Liberty Falls just based on what the map's designed around. And I don't really think that's like a big deal. I don't want the map to be designed around that though. Like, if coincidentally the map ends up just being better for grinding, that's fine. Like, that's not really a big deal to me, but I don't want the map to be designed around that. I don't want them to be sitting there saying, okay, this map is meant to be the grinding map, because the day Zombies dies is the day the whole game is centered around the grind. That is the day Zombies dies for me, is when they don't even care about anything else. It's just all about the grind. And I'm not saying that's what they're doing now. I'm just saying we slowly push into that direction when a map is starting to be like presented as the grinding map. Calling it the grinding map, which some people have been doing online, is such a backhanded compliment to me. It's basically saying the map is shit. Like, that's basically what you're telling me. Again, I'm not saying that's what the map's going to end up being. I do think the map's going to have a lot more to it than just grinding. But if the map is just there to grind, I feel like there's a problem. The next comment comes from Noon Alist. The only reason people are upset about the atmosphere is because there is not a stereotypical starter/spawn room. So I didn't really know if this was a positive or a negative comment. I mean, you guys can let me know in the comments what you think it is, but I don't know. I couldn't tell if this person was saying that they're unhappy that there isn't a stereotypical starter/spawn room, or if they were saying that's the only reason people are hating on it and this person feels like it's kind of a petty reason to hate on the map. I don't know. But I do kind of understand this because I thought about it too. When I first saw gameplay, I was like, well, there's really no spawn room. You just kind of spawn on the roof and you just have the whole map to explore. And that's definitely weird for zombies. Like, it definitely feels off, but I'm also kind of okay with it. Like, it's kind of a different way to do a map where instead of there being a spawn room, it's just the whole map is the spawn room and you just kind of open up doors little by little to open up different buildings. I'm okay with that if it's just for this one map. I'm not really opposed to it, but I do think it's a little weird. I do kind of miss the idea of spawn rooms. I mean, obviously Terminus is going to have probably more of a normal spawn room, but in general, I thought this was an interesting point to talk about. Next comment comes from Jack. I don't see why the community should be angry with Liberty Falls. I remember that everyone was asking Treyarch to drop both a casual friendly and hardcore experience so that both types of players would be catered to, kind of like the Giant and Shadows. Now that Treyarch have done exactly that, people have all of a sudden begun acting like that's not what they've been asking for and are shitting on Liberty Falls for being too small and simplistic and appealing to casual players. So honestly, I think this is just like not fully what I've been personally seeing. So I get part of what's being said here because I have been seeing a little bit of that, but I feel like most of the complaints are not necessarily about the map being casual or simplistic. It's more about the mechanics overall being more casual and simplistic. It's not the map itself. It's not the fact that the map looks casual. It's the mechanics do. The mechanics look very different compared to classic zombies, and obviously we've seen these mechanics since Cold War, so they're not anything new necessarily, but it's stuff that people just fundamentally don't like, and they're gonna have these same mechanics on Terminus, obviously. So I guess that's more so what I've been seeing. I haven't really been seeing people specifically saying it's all about Liberty Falls. It's more so the mechanics in general that will be affecting the whole game. And in the negative comments specifically regards to Liberty Falls were more so based on the atmosphere and the aesthetics just looking a bit bland to most people. But I have seen some stuff of people specifically targeting the map for being simplistic. But again, we have no idea because we don't have any Easter eggs. It's hard to judge the simplicity of a map without seeing the actual Easter eggs to it. Now, is it clearly a very easy map? Yes, that's for sure. But I also think some of the things that made the map seem kind of easy are things that are also going to be on Terminus. I've seen people talk about the armor system. Like, I think one of the the gameplay of Liberty Falls, someone was able to take like 14 hits before going down. I'm assuming that's also going to happen on Terminus if you have the armor system on Terminus as well. So I think some of these comments could definitely carry over to both maps, but I do agree. I think one map is going to be a more simple, easier map. The other map's going to be a bit harder, and that is a good thing in my opinion. I don't necessarily think you have to have separate maps for that though. I've said it before, you could find a way to implement both casual and hardcore experiences on the same map. I don't think that's impossible, but it seems like they're going the route of just making it be separate maps, and I guess that's okay. This next comment I'm going to put in the mixed category because it's definitely kind of like teetering the line of just being purely a mixed comment. I wouldn't say it's positive or negative. This is coming from Odorous Flame. I miss when the problems we had with zombies was map based and not based on the systems of the game. We used to judge games based on how good or bad the maps were, but recently it's been a divide between people that like the new system so they don't mind if the maps aren't that great, Cold War, and people who hate the system so they automatically don't like the game. This is so true, like so insanely true when you really think about it. I feel like this has been happening ever since Black Ops 4, where a lot of conversation specifically around Black Ops 4 was, oh, this map's pretty good, but it would be 1,000 times better if it was in Black Ops 3, or oh, this map sucks, but it would actually be decent if it was in Black Ops 3. And yeah, I feel like we've been seeing that ever since then. And some people say it's the opposite for Cold War, where they said the systems were great, but they hated the maps. But like, I don't know, I didn't love a lot of the systems too, so it was kind of like, yeah, I do think I would like these maps more if they were in a different game, but I do think the maps were still not that great regardless. But I do think this is a fair point, because I do think a lot of people are going to judge these maps not just based on the maps themselves, but also based on, do they even like the mechanics of the game? Because if you don't like the Black Ops 6 systems, then yeah, you're probably not going to love Terminus, you're probably not going to love Liberty Falls. And personally, when I judge maps, I am taking into account the systems of the game. You kind of have to. I always say a map like Ancient Evil, it's in my top 5 favorite maps of all time, but it would probably be like number 1 or number 2 if it was in BO3. I just think the systems would work a bit better, things would be a bit cleaner, and overall I would probably enjoy it even more than I already do. But that's saying quite a bit about Ancient Evil. If even with not liking the BO4 systems that much, I still would put it that high in my ranking. Same with a map like 9, Dead of the Night, even Alpha Omega. Like, I really enjoy those maps, but like, I just think the BO4 systems just kind of hold them back just a little bit. So yeah, I do think this is quite an interesting point to make. It definitely shows the difference in how we judge these games nowadays than we did before. Now we're getting into the comments that I think lean more towards being a bit more negative on Liberty Falls, but I'm not saying they're entirely negative completely, but they're leaning more on that side. The first comment here is coming from Soap Owns Another We. This would be a lot better if we also had a set crew on this map. I feel even if the map looks plain still, a memorable one-off crew would give the map something to be known for. I agree completely. I actually think that's one of the most disappointing things about the Liberty Falls reveal, because they really hyped up the whole idea of returning the set crews for Terminus, and I was so happy about that. I think a lot of people were, and so when they announced that Liberty Falls was not going to have that, I was like, that's kind of just not what I wanted. And especially with the intro cinematic having Richtofen there, I think a lot of people were hoping that Richtofen was going to be a playable character. But even if it wasn't Richtofen, just having some sort of set crew, whether it's random operators that they decide to turn into characters that actually have their own specific like personality traits to them, or perhaps maybe even just civilians in Liberty Falls itself that now get kind of stuck into the situation. That probably wouldn't work story-wise, but even if it is going to be the strike team coming in, why not just give us actual named characters? And I know we're probably going to end up having the Terminus crew carry over into all the DLC maps, so thankfully I'm sure most maps in this game will have a set crew. I would love to see more than one set crew in the game, because most Black Ops games do that. Let's go back to Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4. All of those games had at least 2 set crews in there, and most of them had actually more than that. Black Ops 4 had 5 different crews within that game. You had Primus, Ultimus, the Chaos crew, the Dead of the Night crew, and of course Victus. There's a lot of crews in Black Ops 4, and of course the other games had a bunch as well. So I would have loved to have seen more in this game, but unfortunately, this is all we're getting, just Terminus crew, and then this map is just not going to have one. It feels off. The game had 4 years of development, and they still weren't able to do that. That to me is a bit odd. Now, obviously, if the map was fully a bonus map, something like Nuketown from Black Ops 2, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, you go back to Nuketown Black Ops 2, you weren't really playing as named characters. You were just playing as these random people. It didn't really matter who you're playing as, because it was mainly a bonus map. It was a survival map, whatever. You play it randomly. But that's not what Liberty Falls is. Everyone keeps using the word straightforward bonus map, but it's not. There is going to be a full Easter egg here. There's going to be a full story implication that's going to be really important. This location is really important. It's not just a one-off little bonus map. It's not what it is. It's not what they're presenting it as, and I don't think it's going to end up being that way. So having a set crew would make a huge difference, at least in my opinion. Next comment comes from Thunderstruck. I genuinely believe that there was some trouble going on behind the scenes at Treyarch because what we saw does not look like they were working on it for 4 years. So I do feel like there's probably a few things that are impacting the fact that they had a 4-year development cycle, and I'm going to kind of explain it here. So first of all, Treyarch was working on some other Zombies modes. They worked on Vanguard, they worked on MWZ. Now, obviously, those were small support studios from Treyarch going over to those games. It was not the entire studio, but even just like 20 people, let's say it's a small, really small team of 20 people. I'm sure it was probably more than that, but I have no idea. Let's just say 20 people. That's still 20 less people that are working on the main Black Ops 6 Zombies experience that are now working on MWZ or Vanguard, right? And they had to do both of those. So that is still people that are being taken away from Black Ops 6, still resources being taken away from Black Ops 6. Then, of course, you also have the fact that they are now working on a brand new engine. This is a completely new engine that Treyarch is obviously not used to, so they had to kind of get used to it and make the Zombies mode here for the first time. Well, I guess, obviously, we saw it with MWZ, and technically Vanguard, I guess, was also using the new Modern Warfare engine, so we have seen those types of zombies before, but this is their first time making like a Black Ops Zombies experience with the new engine. So yeah, there's probably some stuff that they had to get used to first and probably held them back just a little bit. Like it being a 4 years of development, I don't necessarily think is like the full 4 years that a lot of people were expecting, unfortunately. And also a big thing that I think could also be affecting them is the fact that they might be making 2 years worth of Zombies content here. The current rumors is that COD 2025 is going to be a Black Ops 2 sequel, most likely developed by Treyarch, at least mostly developed by Treyarch, and I'm assuming if it's going to have a zombies mode, which the current leaks are that it's going to have an outbreak mode as well as round-based zombies, then yeah, they're working not only on Black Ops 6, but also this Black Ops 7. I'm just going to call it Black Ops 7 for now. So that's 2 games within the span of 2 years that they've been working on for the past 4 years. So it's, again, there's so much impacting their development time here, so even though they had 4 years, it still is going to end up being probably like a normal life cycle for Treyarch, which is really unfortunate because I got very excited with the whole idea of them making a zombies mode with whole 4 years of development. I was like, oh my god, this is going to be the craziest zombies ever, and it still definitely could be that for sure. We don't really know. We haven't seen the Easter eggs. We haven't seen what it's going to look like in its fullest yet, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be like as big as people were expecting because of all those other things they also had to do in the meantime. But I could be wrong. Hopefully I am wrong. I hope this is genuinely the craziest zombies ever, and hopefully it's got the most amount of content. They've already said that the Easter eggs are like some of the most amount of stuff they've ever had on maps before. They said Terminus has the most amount of side Easter eggs ever, so hopefully that ends up being true and we get to really just enjoy the most crazy zombies experience ever. But I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. Next comment comes from MVF Gamer. I'm more excited for the mastery camos than the gameplay. Now this has to be a negative comment because I was looking at it, I'm like, sure, it could be perceived as positive, but no, saying you're more excited for the mastery camos than the gameplay, I feel like that's a pretty huge negative for the gameplay itself. But I will say the mastery camos do look beautiful. They look amazing. I'm probably gonna do the camo grind myself. I usually don't do them, but I'm definitely gonna do it this year because those camos look solid. Next comment comes from iKarma. All of the Vanguard maps have better atmosphere than Liberty Falls. The maps in Vanguard actually evoke a zombies vibe, giving you the impression that you're playing a zombies map. In contrast, Liberty Falls feels more like you're playing an LTM on a multiplayer map. So I do think Vanguard had decent atmosphere to it, kind of ruined by the awful HUD, but the atmosphere was relatively okay. Obviously, you're playing on multiplayer maps for quite a few locations on, Darn Fong and Terra Maldicta, but the actual hubs themselves, well, yeah, actually the hubs were also from campaign or multiplayer, but they definitely looked more zombified. I'll definitely give you that. Shinonuma, obviously, I mean, it's Shinonuma, so it's gonna look zombified regardless. And the Archon, I mean, it's not a good looking map, don't get me wrong, but it definitely does have a zombies feel, at least to an extent. Honestly, despite Vanguard being really bad and definitely the worst zombies in the past couple of years, I do think it probably had one of the more interesting art styles. Like even just looking at the specialist abilities, or I guess you can call them field upgrades, those looked a lot cooler than anything we've seen in Cold War, MWZ, or even now in Black Ops 6. Like, I think those looked really cool. They called them like the artifacts. I would love to see something like that return because, like I said, they just looked a lot cooler. Even though the abilities were kind of the same of what we've been seeing with the field upgrades, they at least looked cooler from an art perspective. And the bosses also looked kind of cool as well. I loved Echo and the Archon itself, how it looked. Those all looked really cool. So I'll give Vanguard credit where credit's due for sure, even though it's not a good zombies mode. And the last comment comes from Sandman2000. Liberty Falls should have been like a Dead of the Night level complex map. I know many men will wish death upon me for saying that, but we need every map in Black Ops 6 to be complex after the lackluster complexity of Cold War Zombies. He put complexity in quotes, saying, you know, Cold War is not actually that complex. And making the game like Cold War isn't helping much. Treyarch isn't listening to the fans, and Sledgehammer should take over making zombies from now on. At least Sledge wouldn't make Cold War 2.0. This is an interesting take all around. I mean, obviously I don't agree with everything here, but I agree with parts of it. I do think I would prefer if every map was very complex, sure, but I'm okay with one map not being that complex if that means, you know, some casuals will get into it a little bit more. I've said it before though, I do think a map could be complex and casual at the same time. I don't think that's impossible, but I would be totally fine if every map was complex for sure. But I don't know if we really know what the extent of the complexity is going to be just yet, because we haven't seen the Easter eggs. So I think it really depends on what the Easter eggs are like, and I don't know what Liberty Falls Easter egg is going to be like compared to Terminus. They really haven't said specifically about Easter eggs, like in terms of what the difference will be between the two maps. So we really don't know yet. In terms of Sledgehammer taking over things, I mean, I would love Sledgehammer to make their own zombies, but I don't want them to just take over zombies completely. I think they should make their own mode in their own game, and Treyarch says stick to making their own zombies mode in their own game as well. And that is it for this video. Honestly, when I looked at all the comments that we got under that post, obviously I couldn't go over all of them in this video, but there was actually more positive than negative comments, which was interesting to see. But I do think a big part of that is because I specifically asked for unpopular opinions, and it seems to be a pretty popular opinion to be hating on Liberty Falls right now. So I do think that just kind of leads to getting mostly positive opinions given under that post. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate the comments, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you want to like the video and subscribe to the channel, feel free to. I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.